What's up, everybody? This is Jake Moffitt. Welcome to the Devil Tried Limited podcast series.
And the serpent couldn't win a damn battle if he tried. Lord, he tried, but he can't bring me down, not in this life. Yeah, the devil thought he won this war, but he lost this time.
All right. Well, I'm feeling a lot better about this podcast 3 episodes in. I just feel a lot more comfortable on the microphone. I think I've got my methodology of going throughout the topics that I've pre-written and, trying to jog my memory there. I think I've got that down. I've got that a little bit more organized. So I think I'm just going to jump into it today, and I'm excited to get to this era specifically of my rap career because it was the most energetic of any of the other eras. I think the other eras were more calculated and they were more organized and more, heartfelt. But this era was pure excitement. It was pure energy. It was pure creative thought just put down on a paper and carried out through digital music making. That's a long-winded way of saying I had a lot of fun in this era, and I think the best way to carry on from last episode to this one would be to summarize the ending of last episode. On episode 2, at the end, we talked about how I was going to college, how I just released my first album, Just Don't Abbreviate Me, under JX2000. That went well, and there's some other stories to tell behind that time period that I want to get into. I mentioned Cultivar and making music with some friends back in the last episode, but really did not touch on it. I want to touch on that first and where we go into college and how that all formulates and how that all adds into my career at this time. Cultivar was a group of 4 guys, which ended up growing into maybe a whole collective of 5 or 6. And we would just produce odd music, very odd beats, very odd sample chops, very odd, drums, very odd. I remember we had this song called, I'll have to call Zeke and he'll have to tell me. But it was, Cancun. And Cancun had just like Caribbean steel drums with like trap drums with like 808s, and it was just stupid. That shouldn't have ever been created, but we did it. Anyways, this group would just get together pretty daily and pretty frequently. We would get together and we would make music. I would rap over it or sing over it and just make little demos. That turned into an album called Lab Safety. Lab Safety was an experimental project, as the name precedes, Lab Safety. Keep safety while working in the lab, but we didn't, and that was the irony of it. Lab Safety was just a collection of demos and funny songs, funny beats, cool samples. Some turned out to be songs that we still think are like some of the best things ever made. But Lab Safety was very short-lived. In the grand scheme of my career, it never released per se, but it did make it to YouTube in its demo form at some point. Anyways, Cultivar was exactly that. It was a group of 4 or 5 guys who just got together, produced music, made funny stuff, looked at memes. We were obsessed with this boy band at the time named Brockhampton, and I'm still obsessed with that band. I think they shouldn't have ended. If you're a fan, tell me what you think, but I think that group should have stayed together. Obviously, it's their decision, but I really loved that era of music from them. I loved every era of music from them. Still one of my favorite artists, quote unquote, to this date. Brockhampton was a huge influence. The reason I mention them and mention how important they are to me is they were a huge influence to Lab Safety, but they were also a huge influence to my next 2 albums, really. And I really wanted to be like Brockhampton. I wanted to have as much collaboration as I could have with everyone who would want to make music, with all weird instruments, with all weird vocalists, with all weird genre bending elements of music. And I really got to do that with the next two albums. It was a lot of fun, and I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. But first, let's go into summer after senior year of high school into first year of college, freshman year of college. I went to college without much of a purpose besides get my engineering degree. I didn't have much of a purpose of making friends. I remember not really caring about any of the organizations. We had this thing. I went to Arkansas Tech University in Russellville, Arkansas, as I mentioned multiple times in my rap songs. Anyways, I went to this thing called Time Out for Tech, which is an event where high school students go and they learn about the school. They learn about what organizations are on campus. They learn about what's to do as a student there. I didn't really care about all of that. I just knew I was rooming with one of my buddies, Dylan Pelt, and I wanted to make music with him, Zeke, who was also going to Tech, and Jake, who was also going to Tech. It was a real eye-opener for me when I got to college and I realized that, life is not all about just staying in my tiny circle. It's not all about just staying to myself and being quiet and not getting out and meeting people. So there ended up being an on-campus event once I went to college, so like my first week, and all of the fraternities were on campus with a tent or an informational session or whatever you want to call that. You've been to these events where different organizations and different groups have their tents up and they're giving out donuts or they're giving out burgers or they're giving out hot dogs or they're giving out pizza, etc. And I went by a few of those tents because I knew when I got to college I wanted to party, and that's obviously completely opposite from what I just said about wanting to stay in my own circle. But I did want to break away from a box that I felt like I was held in high school from my parents. And that's no disrespect to my parents. That's how you parent. Your parents parent you, and they parent you a certain way that they think is going to make you turn out the best that they can possibly have you turn out. So no diss or disrespect or hate to them. But I wanted to get out of that shell, and I wanted to get out of that really sheltered mindset of like, I'm an adult. I wanted to be an adult. I was 18 years old, or at the time 17, but I was about to turn 18 years old, and I wanted to live that out, even though I still didn't want to make a million friends and be in all these groups and organizations. So it's a little bit of a balance there. I wanted to have fun, but I didn't want to have all the relationships that came with the fun. I just wanted to have fun. So move on from there. I got to college. I was at this informational event, and I saw the fraternities, and I was like, I got to at least talk to some of them. So I did. I went and talked to Sigma Pi. I went and talked to Kappa Sig, Pike, and I got to KA. And I realized that there were some guys I went to high school with that were a little bit older than me in high school, but they ended up joining KA, Kappa Alpha order, as a freshman in college or a sophomore in college. So I started talking to them, catching up with them. Hadn't seen them since high school. That's all good and great. Well, I really felt led to do that in my time in college, join a fraternity, and I started to pursue that. I started to hang out with them. I started to party with them. I started to be around other people and meet new people and make new relationships, and that was healthy for me in every way. All right, so let's get all of this back to music. Something that all the guys in the fraternity that were from Alma, where I went to high school, something they all knew about me and bragged on me about was that I made music and I rapped. And in a weird way, it's almost a selling point to you as a fraternity member or a potential fraternity member, is you have something special about you. Now, mine was really weird and goofy to most people, which was hip-hop music, but at the same time, it showed that in some ways I wasn't normal. In some ways I was normal. On one hand, I made rap and hip-hop music. On the other hand, I was really put together and had good grades and was valedictorian in high school, all that. So I really had a weird vibe to me, and that actually appeals to fraternities. And people don't know that. They think fraternities they think they just go after people who will party and who will make them look, really, really cool. But fraternities need those members that have talents, that have aspirations, that get good grades, that want to apply their leadership abilities to that fraternity or organization. So, long story short, recruitment comes around, and recruitment, for everybody that doesn't know, is when potential fraternity members join a fraternity. And you go through this process, and they pick you, and you pick them, and you have to pick each other. And I ended up picking KA. KA ended up picking me. So, to summarize all that, I got some new brothers. Brothers in the form of people who wanted to hang out with me, people who wanted to learn more about me, and wanted to support me, for lack of better words. Back to the music. I'm going to keep saying that because I'm going to insert life things in this story as well as music things. I was working on an album that I felt like was my next step, and it had a lot of different music on it. It had poppy elements. It had really hard trap elements. It had like really dark trap elements on it. And that was fun to me, but also the poppy, singy stuff was fun to me too. Similar to my last album, but more focused on like the dichotomy of really bright, happy, singy songs and really dark, heavy rapping, heavy topics type of rap. So I started working on this album called 5 Seconds, and the concept was you've got 5 seconds left to do what you can do on this earth. What are you going to do with it? And the concept worked for me in my inspirational creativity side of myself, but it really didn't work as a releasable album. The concept really didn't make sense to anybody, and I got that feedback from my friends in college that paid attention to my music, aka Cultivar, who were at Tech. So the whole time making 5 seconds, my friends at Tech were telling me, hey, this doesn't really make sense, but keep going with it. You're making some cool stuff. And that album ended up turning into an album called Freshman Demos. Freshman Demos is up on iTunes today, and you can see me and my baby picture on there. And I really wanted to symbolize that I was a baby at this college. I was a freshman. I was still growing. I was still young. And that's the point of the concept of that album. Also, it having demos in it really worked because a lot of the songs ended up being different than each other in their own little way. Some were really, really, really dark and heavy. Some were really, really, really happy and bright and made you smile. Some were really singy but were really dark topic-wise. And Freshman Demos was just a fever dream of having fun, really energetic, really like ADHD, if I can look back on it myself, of just creating every single day, creating something new every single day, producing something new every single day. And speaking of producing, this is where I really built my stamina as a producer. This is where I really put my 10,000 hours into producing, which this is nowhere near my best production on this album, but it was way better, like 100 times better than just on Abbreviate Me. So I released that album. It goes really well. I'll go on ahead and go through the track list and kind of give you a breakdown of everything that was important about that album. You had songs like the intro, which was just the introduction instrumentally to the second song called Sheesh, which was a super trap banger, really dark production, but really just a light topic, and had me just kind of flexing on there in a way, and that was fun. And that transitions into track 3, which is called Brighter, which is a straight up romantic, poppy, but still hip hop banger. That goes into In the Teeth, which is really dark production, dark sample, dark rapping, dark mixing, dark everything, but not aggressive per se, just kind of a dark vibe. Then I had Words I Could Say with Reese, which was kind of a romantic Rainin' Part 2. If you listen to episode 2, I made a song called Rainin', and it's kind of a part 2 to that. Then you get into Off My Mind, which was a then romantic just breakdown of my heartbreak and my emotions and everything that was going on romantically for Jacob Moffett at that time. Then you go to Wishes, which is really a ode to people in my family and people from back home in Alma who were hearing things about me, who were hearing that I was partying, who were doubting that I had kept my faith with the Lord, who were doubting that I was the same person as I was in high school, which in some ways, in a lot of ways actually, I was not the same person. But it was an ode to those people who doubted me, who thought I had lost my way, lost my faith, which in some ways I had lost my way, but I never lost my faith. And that was the point of this song, was to say, you know, maybe all of my wishes don't mean anything, but I just need to trust in God with everything I have, and everything will be okay. Then you get to Sovereign, which is a pick back up from the religious side of Just Don't Abbreviate Me, and returning to a religious but dark rap song. And that was really fun to make. It has Pastor J.D. Finley in it, which is one of my best friends to this day. He's been on my albums for years, and can't thank him enough for everything he's done for me. Then you go on to Words of Encouragement, which is with Brandon Fox, who I mentioned in the last episode. One of those people that I met early on that taught me the ropes of how to do hip-hop music, how to do Christian hip-hop music, how to infuse all that together. He gave me some words of encouragement, not a song, just an interlude. Then you get to Willie and Boom. Boy, were these songs some of the breakout songs for me and my fraternity friends in college. These songs let people know that I was willing to have fun with my music, but at the same time, Willie was a really dark song, and even though it was fun, it was dark production, dark pianos, dark trap beats, just everything dark you can think, like Young Dolph, dark piano type beat. And then that led into Boom, which was one of the darkest songs I've ever made in my life. One of the most aggressive songs I've ever made in my life. Maybe not the most aggressive, but if you listen to it, you'll get what I mean. I'm screaming damn near on that track. And I was really just wanting to emphasize the aggressiveness I was trying to come through on this album. And that really juxtaposes from the next song, and also Brighter and songs like Words I Could Say that were a lot more heartfelt and happy, and it was really a preview for what was to come in my career, which was a dichotomy of happy and sad, angry and content that showed itself in all of my albums at some point. Side note, I made a music video for Willie/Boom, and you can find that on my YouTube channel. So if you want to check that out, you can, but I'm retired, so I'm not making any more. So I mentioned the next track. The next track is called Been Chillin' Summertime. Actually, in parentheses, Summertime. But I digress. This song was really a fun way to end the album. It's the last technical track on the album. There is a bonus track after this. But Been Chillin' Summertime is a Caribbean steel drum, happy sort of banger, just saying that I've been chillin'. And it's really not a deep and introspective track, just a fun way to end the album off so people didn't think I was in mental torment, which in some ways I was, but I was also happy at the time, and I wasn't really trying to show the world that I was struggling more than I actually was. Then that leads to the last song, the 13th song, called Rollin', which is a bonus track, and it is a pure, almost Brighter, not remake, but that vibe remake. And just a fun track. Thought it was a Lucy. Thought I'd add it to the end of the album. If you see in my career, I did that a lot. I just wanted to add songs on top of the original track list just to give the fans or give the people who listen to my music more to listen to, because why not? At that time, you're trying to get bigger and get better. Any song can pop off at any time. So that's why Rolling got added on there. But let's move on from this album further into the story. We're still in 2019 at this time. So I had a moment where I was at a KA conference, KA being my fraternity, and this album released at that conference. And I had this flood of emotions rush over me when this album released, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing making this music? Not many people are listening to it. I mean, if you compared my numbers from this album and from these singles to the last album, I really was not happy with it. I was not happy with the way things were turning out for me and what people were saying about my music, which was not much, but when they did, it was always some sly comment like, oh, haha, bro, you make hip-hop music, you must be all right then. Or just something that would make me not feel great about making music, which I learned to just walk through later on. But I wanted to retire, and I put that on Instagram, and I was like, this is my last album, this is the final one. And there was no ending to my career musically. There was just an abrupt stop. And I said I was retiring, and I kind of had my Kanye moment where I was like, this is it. I'm done. So my next move was to just go back to making music in private, go back to enjoying the art form of making music. And to do that, I went back and started working on lab safety again with Cultivar. And that was fun. It was productive. It got my inspiration back. I don't think that was a bad thing to do, but that ended up turning into another album that I wanted to make called Finer Things. Keep in mind, Freshman Demos is released. My second album is released. In the background, I'm making this album called Finer Things, and it's really just a more polished form of lab safety, which Finer Things actually had some dope tracks on it, and it had some cool experimentation, but that wasn't really, again, like 5 seconds. It wasn't really the concept that was going to be released. So, in all this time, something tragic happened within my family that affected me to this day, obviously, and it affected the music I made from there on out. My grandmother, Mama Maddie, died of pancreatic cancer, and that shook me to my core. I also lost my relationship with my girlfriend at the time, so everything was just going wrong for me, and my only solution was to make music. I didn't have much more of a answer to my problems besides make music. And something that I haven't mentioned up to this point is that I was also trying to solve my problems with partying. COVID-19 was hitting around this time, so depression was at an all-time high, or I guess you could say I was at an all-time low. And my solution was Adderall, weed, mushrooms, alcohol. There's no other way to explain how these things were wrecking my life, but I thought they were numbing the pain. I thought they were taking care of me at that time. These things caused a rift in my family. They caused a rift in my relationships with my mother and my father. They caused a rift in my relationship with God. They caused a rift in everything. So if you're listening to this podcast, I encourage you to not do those things, not numb your pain with those substances, because it really doesn't solve the core issue. And I'm going to make this a quick moment of discipling for you guys. God is the answer to a death in the family. God is the answer to an addiction. God is the answer to anything that you're caught up in. It's really hard to talk about that because it was a hard time in my life. But luckily, I was able to put those things away. Some of those things were put away quickly. some were put away in future timelines of this life, and I'm happy that God delivered me from those. But these things were really causing a rift in my emotional life. And of course, my Mama Maddie dying was tragic, but I had to pick that up and pick myself up somewhere in a place of music. And that's what I did with my next album called Just Shut Up and Trap. Finer Things was really the building blocks of Just Shut Up and Trap, and not in the way that 5 Seconds was to Freshman Demos. 5 Seconds had most of the same songs as Freshman Demos. Just Shut Up and Trap was a complete rework of Finer Things. Some songs were taken off there, but not many. It was a complete rework, and I really wanted to have fun making music again and use that as my therapy for what was going on in my life instead of the drugs and the alcohol and the things I was doing. So I decided to make another album, and at the end of it, fake retire, because I knew I'd want to retire, but I knew if I fake retired that I could still come back and it wouldn't look as weird that I retired the second time in a row after an album. So let me go to Just Shut Up and Trap real quick, and let's look at what this album had on it. Start off the album with Just Shut Up and Trap, the intro. Super fireworks inspired intro. Just wanted to make a celebratory track for getting back into making music. This is my first track back, technically, from being retired, quote unquote. So, just a fireworks celebration track. The next song was Slimy with Dewi. Dewi is my little in my fraternity, and honestly, one of my closest connections today, not in the sense that we talk every day, but I think about him every day. I think about the influence that he had on me every day. I miss him. He's living his own life now. He's got a kid. He's got a wife. That's a beautiful thing, and I love Dewi. Next track, Ice Cream. This is a long album, so I'm going to try to speed through this one more than I have the other albums. The next track is Ice Cream with Keaton King, one of my best friends of my life. You know, some people you don't talk to every day, like Dewi, like Keaton, but they're best friends in my life and people I consider brothers and soul connections for life. Ice Cream was with Keaton and Olivia Battles, Reese, and that was just a play on the song Ice Cream Paint Job by Duro, and I just wanted to have fun. And then on to track 4, Mismatch. This was just a track where I was pointing out the mismatches in culture. One, the mismatch of me being a white guy rapping and being in the hip-hop culture and how that was a mismatch, but also the mismatch of culture and how it meant to build up people in the hip-hop community, but it also meant to break down people in the hip-hop community with bars about guns, with bars about drugs, with bars about disrespecting different gangs and disrespecting different parties within street culture, within hip-hop culture, etc. Then the next track is I Came Up, which was really a song about me coming up. That's the best way I can say it. The next track, LOL OMG, which was me kind of laughing at people making fun of me making music, me bragging, me flexing, all that stuff. The next track, Mismatch 2, is kind of a part 2 of Mismatch, obviously. And track 8 was Kill Me, featuring Brandon Fox. That was our first time actually making music since our breakout track on his album. I think we had made one song in between there called GTU, but for the most part, this was our first time making music together again. Go on to No Pressure, which ended up being one of the most important songs of my career. It was a really fun trap banger song. On to I Think I Miss Her, which was directly influenced to the romantic pain I was dealing with losing my girlfriend at the time. But it was really just a fun song to make light of it and have fun. On to Love Hurts, a complete opposite take of my relationship that I lost. which is just love hurts, fighting for your love, and you know it never works. So that's the premise of that song. It's just hurting through your romantic and emotional pain. On to Rings on Rings, track 12. Rings on Rings was honestly a song I remade to shout out Paco and G, who were two of my best friends in college. I had made a song previously that had mentioned them that had two features that I wasn't comfortable putting on my own album because I still respected not cursing in music, and I still respected having dignity in my music in that way. So I made Rings on Rings to shout them out and kind of just make a fun song and add it on the album. On to Broad Day, which was track 13. It was just a fun trap song. On to track 14, Revelation. Hint, we're coming to the end of the album, Revelation, the end of the Bible. That song was really about ending the album, ending this period of my life, ending this period of hurt, and I think I successfully did that with that track. It's one of the most important tracks off the album, even though it's not the most glamorous or beautiful. Then we get to the last track on the album called Death Scene. As I talked about before, I wanted to stage a fake retirement with this album or a fake death of JX to inspire the next project and create a sense of urgency to make that next project. So Death Scene was really that finality of JX 2000 and JX is dying and this is a movie. It's really all simulation. JX is over. Not really. But I think you'll see later on where Death Scene 2 and Death Scene 3 come into play why I did this. So that ends off the album. There were 2 bonus tracks. Baby Baby with Reese, again, just a really fun trap track. And Okay Okay with Spaceboy, who I'll start to mention here in a few minutes when I meet the future members of Got That Bag Entertainment, my label, my friend group, my group of musicians that I worked with for the next 2-3 years. So that album ends. I release it in, let's see what day that album released on. April 3rd, 2020. So we're in mid-2020 at this point, spring of 2020. And that album releases. The fake retirement's already happened, but I didn't really announce it on Instagram this time. So I don't think really anyone knew about the retirement because all I said was in Death Scene that it's a death scene like I'm in a movie. People trying to test. So basically I didn't retire, but I had a Death of JX song in that album. After this really opened doors because I started to get out of my depression as a person. I started to get out in the world a little bit more. I got a new job at 10 Box Cost Plus grocery store in Russellville, Arkansas, where I met Jason Clark, aka Kid 88, and you can see him featured on multiple of my albums from this point on, but we clicked immediately. I started producing for his album. He started doing features on my album. We started working together musically in every way. And with meeting Kid 88, I also met who I had mentioned before on the bonus track, Spaceboy, Hazy. I had actually made a track with him previously in my college career, which was kind of a diss track to another fraternity, which doesn't need to be mentioned. It's not important to the story, but we met through that. He did the bonus track on Just Shut Up and Trap, and we ended up working together pretty heavily in the future, which I'll mention here in a minute. And along with Kid 88 and Spaceboy, I met Isaac Evans, who was a member of Pike at Arkansas Tech. He wanted to start rapping, writing, everything with music, and I kind of ushered him into that lifestyle, into that way of music, and that was really cool. We ended up working together pretty heavily during that time. Nothing of his ever came out solo work-wise, but he ended up being on my final album in Conclusion, which was super important to me. Along with Isaac, Spaceboy, and Kid 88, I met GK, Grant King, who was a rapper I knew through my fraternity brother, Junior. And he introduced us. We made a lot of music together. I ended up executive producing a few of his albums. He ended up being on my final album In Conclusion, which will be kind of the pinnacle to my rap career at the end of this story of JX2000. And lastly, I met Lil Tony, who was and is still one of the most important people to my musical journey. He wasn't a rapper. He was just Jason's friend. He wanted to get into rapping, but he really wasn't committed that much. He was like, I'll get on a verse, but I'm not really going to rap that much. Now he's got 5 albums out or 4 albums or whatever. So I'm not saying in any way that I'm to thank for him rapping, but I'm sure he would put some credit on JX2000 helping him start his rap career. And it's one of the guys that just I love to this day. He's one of the guys that makes me proud and is growing with every project, and I couldn't be more happy to say I was a part of his journey. This sparked something in me. I wanted to start a movement. I wanted to start a label. I wanted to start something where rappers around the area and within our friend group could collaborate, make songs together, produce songs together. And with that came the creation of Got That Bag Entertainment, which I mentioned earlier. Got That Bag Entertainment, as I look at the logo here on my wall in my studio, was one of the most important things that I ever created or did, more important than any album I ever created. It gave me a friend group that was alike and that was congruent to me, and I can't thank them enough for being a part of it. But Got That Bag was a source for all things musical collaboration, and many albums came out of that, and I love it. It's just one of the memories that I can look back on and smile every time. Something that I'm sort of cutting out of the story is that I was working on my 4th studio album at this time called Full Form. It was full form from the beginning. It never wasn't full form. It was always full form. Just to make that clear. No, this idea led into this idea. I created Full Form trying to make my best project possible with no underlying themes, with no underlying, emotional ties to anything. I just wanted to make the best music possible, and that album actually has on the cover and in the name, That Boy JX Got That Bag, which was one of the slogans that one of my buddies in my fraternity came up with. Colt Millsap, he goes on the mic one time when we're just goofing around, he goes, That Boy JX Got That Bag. And when he did that, I was like, I got to keep that. That's going to be my new tag. Well, that tag turned into the name of Got That Bag Entertainment. And that fueled me to make that project. That fueled me to make these songs. That fueled me to start including collaboration on my albums to the fullest extent. Just as a side note, this album was created in 2020 but released on January 1st, 2021. So the dates might seem misleading in the title of this episode, but yeah. I'll go through this album really quick, similarly to Just Shut Up and Trap and how I did that. This album included A Full Mind in the Emptiest Times, which is kind of a boom bap, rap, lyrical showcase of my ability. Ultimate step up from everything from the previous album. Then you go on to Honolulu/Time Zone, featuring Kid 88, who I met at Timbox, who was one of my best friends and still is one of my best friends to this day. That goes on to Trust Me a Lil with Reese, and we created that just on a whim. It was kind of a rap, pop mix-up on another romantic take of a song. Me and Reese were good at that. So that's something I can say I'm proud of looking back on my music with her. On to the 4th track, you have Skinny Freestyle, which was a trap start to a song and then had a beat switch in the middle to a boom bap type beat. And I rapped on that. And I think I killed most of these beats looking back on it. I think I killed most of these beats off rip. And I'm super proud of myself for coming back from Just Shut Up and Trap, which was really a artistic ADHD session of just me writing everything down, me recording everything and not thinking about it and putting it out. This album was really calculated, and I'm proud of that. You go to track 5, you have Evander, which was really a more low, slow vibe to an intro to the next song, Cut the Intermission, which ended up being the single. Cut the Intermission was a sample of Migos' Bad and Bougie. And I didn't remember that I sampled it until I released it. And I was like, I hope I don't get in trouble for that. But Cut the Intermission was a banger of a song. It was the single. It had a video to it. Super fun song to make. Ended up being the anthem for me and my fraternity. I don't want to say the anthem for the whole fraternity, but for my buddies making music, it ended up being the most popular song out of the bunch. You go to track 7, you have Need Me featuring Baby Scarface, who was a popular artist out of my original hometown, if you remember from the first episode, Meridian, Mississippi. And I wanted to collaborate with artists from that area at the time, and Baby Scarface was somebody I got linked up with. I'm really not sure how that happened, but we made some good music together, and Need Me was one of those songs. You go on to track 8, you have Groceries. Groceries was a super fun song just to honor my time at Tin Box, which I was still working that job, but I wanted to shout out my job and how I stocked groceries, and that was my claim on that song. So nothing more to say there. You have number 9, No Excuses, which was a part 2 to No Pressure from Just Shut Up and Trap, and it was really fun. Again, just a display of my production ability, a display of my rapping ability, a display of my melodic ability. Nothing more to be said. Last song, Pain Music. It was me circling back on everything that I said on Just Shut Up and Trap about my pain and what pain I was still dealing with, what I was still going through, but what I was overcoming. And at the end of that is where Isaac Evans did a little vocal interlude. Isaac Evans from GTB. And he said, I want to get making this country music. Like, we should really start working on that beyond the rap music. And that foreshadowed a lot that happened in my career following that. So that's really cool to think about now. But that concludes Full Form in my creation there. Some things to catch back up on in the time of making this album. I made a small project with Spaceboy, or Hazy, called SpaceX. I'm JX, he's Spaceboy, SpaceX. That made the most sense. It was a really cool collaboration. We released it on Christmas. Full Form released on New Year's. And along with Full Form, I did a live performance at my buddy's house in college and put it on Instagram Live. It's on my YouTube now. It was a really cool way for me to learn how to perform and learn how to actually rap these songs to my friends. And honestly, one of the biggest building blocks for me as an artist was at that time. The last thing I want to point out in this whole process was meeting my fiance, and I met her through a Bible study we were doing at the university. It was called Greekwide. And Greekwide was a religious organization that was tailored towards Greek organizations at Arkansas Tech University. And through that, I met Macy Brooke, which she is asleep right now, but she's my fiance and going to be my wife forever. And I love her, and she's the best. So she'll be happy I said that, I'm sure. I hope. But a lot of things were happening for me at this time. To answer one question, no, I did not start dating my fiance at this time. We just met at this time. So a lot of things were happening for me as a person at this time. I was gaining my confidence back. I was gaining my joy and happiness back, and my faith was strong as ever. Maybe not as strong as high school, but it was stronger than ever in college. And I really grew a lot in this time. I know that this was a loaded episode full of albums and track breakdowns and everything of the sort, but we have made it through 2020. This was an episode to cover everything from 2018 to 2020, and I'm excited to get into 2021 and how that led into Got That Bag evolving. We're going to save that for the next episode because I realized that this episode has so much substance and so much meat in it that you really need to take a second to breathe before you get into 2021, 2022, and eventually get into my country career. So thank you guys for listening. Please don't hesitate to ask me questions. Don't hesitate to send this to other folks who you think might be interested. Share this on all of your communities, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Please give this video a like, subscribe, comment, just interact in any way you can. I love you guys. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this process. I'm so excited to get to where this podcast series is leading. It's an album release, but we're going to have a great time on episode 4, 5, 6, and 7. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
The devil tried, God forbid I tell another lie. The devil wants my soul tonight, but Lord, don't let him take my life. I've been talking to the man in the sky.